Hello, everybody. It's Philip Lee returning with Civil War Chat on the 17th of June, 2021. Just a note to click on the notification bell in the upper right if you'd like to get future episodes, and also on the subscription button in the lower right where I'm pointing there. Today's talk is going to be about critical race theory at Washington and Lee University. Critical race theory, CRT, is presently the dominant branch of a social philosophy fashionable among modern historians known as critical theory. The latter, critical theory, postulates that the people of all countries are composed of two classes, oppressors and victims. It presumes that a nation's accomplishments result from the former's exploitation of the latter. Its roots lie with Karl Marx in the 19th century, who designated capitalists as the oppressors and workers as the victims. Now, critical race theory substitutes blacks as the victims and whites, particularly white males, and we'll get into why males later, particularly white males are categorized as oppressors. In principle, critical theory merits some study. In practice, it is toxic, highly toxic, because its disciples tend towards extremism and are prone to dictatorial conduct after their beliefs gain purchase among the cultural elite. Communism, for example, was repeatedly tried with disastrous outcomes, including the deaths of tens of millions under tyrannical regimes. Assistant law professor Brandon Hasbrouck is W&L's most outspoken critical race theory teacher. His, quote, starting, close quote, recommendations to, quote, reconcile Washington and Lee for its racial offenses over the past 225 years are provided in his W&L Law Review article last year and include, quote, 1, removal of both namesakes. 2, present faculty must confess to having, quote, perpetuated racist thinking and policymaking, close quote. 3, the school must make a commitment to transform the student body from 3% black to at least 50%, quote, of color, close quote, over the next 9 years. 4, it must also pledge to transform the racial constitution of the Board of Trustees, faculty, and administration to at least 50%, again, quote, of color over the next 9 years. 5, adopt critical race theory in similar classes as requirements for all W&L students. 6, pay reparations to the, quote, living descendants, close quotes, of slaves once owned by the school. Now, beyond his advice to Washington and Lee, Hasbrouck also recommends in an article he wrote for the Richmond Dispatch, Times Dispatch it is, I think, he recommends that the federal government allot 2 votes to each black voter while restricting whites to a single vote. Now, although I haven't taken any classes from Professor Hasbrouck, and I haven't been able to audit them online, so I'm going to comment upon what I've gained by studying the remarks of leading advocates of critical race theory. So let me begin here with my script. Although Professor Hasbrouck's recommendations may seem excessive considering that slavery ended 155 years ago and affirmative action and Great Society welfare programs have been operative for more than 50 years, Hasbrouck's conclusions and recommendations are consistent with the viewpoint of leading critical race theory practitioners. One example is Ibram Kendi of American University, which I think is in Washington, D.C., who wants to establish a new federal Department of Anti-Racism, let's call it the DOA, Department of Anti-Racism, which will be sanctioned to nullify, veto, or abolish any law. It could also censor the speech of anyone, including the president, whose remarks are contrary to anti-racist dogma. The DOA would have no political appointees and instead be staffed by civil servant experts trained in anti-racism and empowered to investigate the applicable policies of both private and public organizations. The new department would be unaccountable to the voters or any branch of the federal government. In short, on racial matters, it would be dictatorial and therefore more powerful even than the Justice Department, which at least provides for due process and trial by jury. Critical race theory leaders are dissatisfied with the Justice Department because they argue that equality under the law is really a camouflage for white supremacy, patriarchy, and racial oppression. In 1993, pioneering advocate Cheryl Harris equated whiteness with property ownership in a law review article that she wrote. She recommended a suspension of private property rights so that land and wealth may be seized from the rich and redistributed to others along racial lines. Later advocates that followed her have attacked the principles of non-discrimination, colorblindness, individual rights, school integration, freedom of speech, and meritocracy. All that matters to them is equality of outcome, regardless of how they get there, even if they have to do it through school segregation, discrimination in favor of color, and the abolition of free speech. According to the Manhattan Institute's Christopher Rufo, critical race theory would replace our system of equality under the law with a system of so-called equity. Whereas equality under the law seeks to protect individual rights regardless of race, equity seeks to divide the world into competing racial groups to guarantee race-based equality of outcomes by proactively using racial discrimination to get there. Finally, they would abolish capitalism and replace it with collectivism. According to Kendi, for example, to be truly anti-racist, you must also be anti-capitalist. Critical race theory has achieved its power because it is part of a coalition that includes feminists who imagine that women are dominated by a misogynistic patriarchy. Like CRT adherents, like critical race theory adherents, feminists also reject equality of opportunity in favor of equality of outcomes. Yet women are often disproportionately represented in academic offices of diversity, equity, and inclusion. The WNL website, for example, indicates that the DEI office is staffed by at least twice as many women as men. Together with CRT advocates, feminists lead the intersectional coalition of so-called minorities that dominate the political left and have disproportionate influence in our government, educational, and large corporate institutions. As a result, the FBI has been holding workshops on intersectionality. The Department of Homeland Security has been telling white employees they are committing micro inequities and have been socialized into oppressor roles. White male employees of the nuclear weapons Sandia National Laboratories in New Mexico were required to attend a 3-day conference where they were told that they had created a white supremacy culture analogous to the KKK. CRT intrusion into education is shocking. In Cupertino, California, third graders were forced to, quote, deconstruct, close quote, their sexual identities and then rank themselves in terms of power and privilege based upon those sexual identities. Presumably, if they were white males, they had to rank themselves as being privileged to everyone else. In a middle school workshop for teachers in Springfield, Missouri, told white male English-speaking Christians that they were members of the oppressor class who must atone for their white supremacy. In Seattle, the school district told white teachers they were guilty of, quote, spirit murder, close quote, against Black children. In sum, critical race theory is not a movement that will blow over. It is deeply embedded in our educational and government institutions and rapidly gaining traction in corporate America. Remaining silent will change nothing. It can only be checked. This movement can only be checked if Americans muster the courage to oppose it. Like cowardice, however, courage is contagious. So go ahead and be courageous. It'll spread around. Other people will pick it up. Now, for information on critical race theory, I'm going to give you some references here, and you can do a search on YouTube for any one of these guys. Chris Rufo, or Rufo, Chris Rufo, R-U-F-O. Okay, that's the first one. Second, James Lindsay, L-I-N-D-S-A-Y, James Lindsay. And then third, Coleman Hughes, H-U-G-H-E-S. Do a YouTube search for them, or on a Google search if you want to find their written commentary. But you may find the YouTube the easiest to access and comprehend. Those three I recommend. Now, what I want to follow up with now is to show you a book that I'm recommending, which is my book on trading with the enemy. It's a book about the Civil War, concerning the intersectional trade between the North and South during the Civil War. Now, some people may be surprised to learn that twice as much cotton crossed the battle lines to go to New England than was exported through the maritime blockade. Intersectional trade during the Civil War was a big deal. And some of it was pretty shady. One U.S. senator may well have been involved in trading weapons for cotton in order to provide cotton for his textile mills in New England. It's all in here. Trading with the Enemy by Philip Lee. You can get it at Barnes & Noble and Amazon for $26. If you'd like to have an autographed copy, contact me directly. Philip Lee, that would be Phil, P-H-I-L _ Lee, L-E-I-G-H at me.com. And I can get you an autographed copy for $29, and I will send it to you for that price. Free, I'll cover the postage for $29 if you're here in the United States. Okay, that's our show for today, and thanks for watching.